And thank you for inviting us. It's been really fascinating hearing all these different people with so much knowledge and realizing how much of that knowledge hasn't been captured in the aftermath of this terrible tragedy. We had a Zoom meeting the other day, and one of the next of kin said, "Thou shalt not kill." And that's really the bottom line. If you forget that principle, it doesn't matter, as you said, how many laws and regulations there are, if there aren't individuals who have a certain sense of responsibility, moral duty, integrity. What we found in Grenfell Tower, as you can see, 72 people lost their lives. Nazanin's mother and aunt are in this collage of beautiful faces, but you don't need words to explain. As you can see, 85% of those who perished were from ethnic minorities, and as Nazanin explained, fairly new communities from the diasporas of the world where conflict as a result of Western hegemony had really been created in those parts of the world where insecurity led people to leave, and they ended up in North Kensington. We just had a public inquiry report published last week, and we had a press conference where we gathered the immediate families of those who died, the families behind the faces on the posters, and it was very powerful. But we also weighed the actual inquiry report, as you can see on those scales, a different scale of justice. Because these were very expensive words. We spent 7 years, and the public purse paid for £173 million to produce this report, a forensic report that looked at all the different aspects except the issue of race. That was the one thing that was not part of the terms of reference. I worked out that per kilo, this cost £23 million per kilo of words. Very expensive words. But those words won't mean anything if it's not actually translated into action. And inquiries don't produce action, they produce recommendations that in our country the government may or may not act upon. Between 2009 and 2017, there were 68 public inquiries costing £638 million, producing 2,685 recommendations, of which only 6 moved forward to select committees. So inquiries themselves have been weaponized, although they're a great idea for society to explore things in a forensic manner, but it's almost become weaponized as a way of dampening something down, making it look like you're doing something, kicking it into the long grass, and exhausting people to the point where no one really cares anymore. One of the reports I thought was interesting said, Grenfell report risks of holding everyone to account is no one actually gets the blame. And that's actually what's happened. One of the graphics that Nazanin showed has become known as the infamous web of blame, where all the companies are linked to each other, and therefore no one is responsible. This actually produces a problem in terms of criminal prosecution. So what did we do in the aftermath? It was really interesting to listening to the opening remarks by Mr. Sennett, where he talks about communities and adjacencies and porosity and so on. And I would really love to read more about that, those issues, because in the aftermath, the authorities were actually missing. It was the community itself that came together to help each other, because there was really nothing in the structures because of systemic racism where there was appropriate response. So Grenfell Next of Kin came together around 2019. Very organically, the families of the deceased felt that they were not being seen or heard. And it really made me very cross because, you know, I'm much older than Nazanin. but we came from the same country. I came to London in 1974, and it really broke my heart to see that so little had changed, and so little had, how little kind of participation there was from different communities in all the structures, from the lawyers to the authorities to the civil service to the social workers, the mental health therapists that came in. It was all handled from very much a white British kind of perspective or European perspective, and yet the people that we were responding to in that moment were already very marginalized. So we just came together, and we've just been doing various campaigns really to give agency to the families of the people who were killed. From flying off to the Emirates to ensure that the Kingspan sponsorship of Lewis Hamilton's Formula One race in Abu Dhabi did not have the name of Kingspan, which are one of the corporates involved in the criminal investigation and the civil litigation and the inquiry emblazoned on his car. But it required us literally to go there, to fly there at our own cost, to go there and demand. Everything that's happened has been us demanding it, people demanding it, and demanding it from the perspective of the most marginalized. Because of course what the government did in the immediate aftermath, the morning after the fire, they announced the inquiry. And so it was all very controlled. Everything from the beginning was extremely well choreographed and controlled. So the marginalized were also marginalized in the aftermath, despite having suffered this great loss. We did some projections on the tower, which have been very controversial actually, because some people feel that because the tower is a sacred site, that it should not be used to project political messaging or any kind of messaging. That in itself is sort of quite problematic. Who decides? Who decides that this shouldn't happen? Because of course, where you've got people who are very angry and want to be seen and heard, surely they should be allowed to use whatever means necessary to be seen and heard. And it brought to mind the phrase that we heard a lot in all the 999 calls at the end before everyone passed away, because most people were on the phone to their families as they were taking their last gasp. It was repeatedly, "We can't breathe, we can't breathe," which of course echoed the George Floyd "I can't breathe" moment. And we also projected the demand for justice on the tower. But it brought to mind that famous case of Emmett Till in the civil rights movement, when Emmett Till was killed by white supremacists. His mother very bravely decided to have an open casket coffin. And this was extremely brave, but it was that singular courage of that woman that really changed everything, changed the narrative, and also changed the way that people were responding to what was this sort of crisis really in the United States. So I think it's important to think about who decides what is appropriate action, in such cases. Should society be confronted with all of this kind of cruelty? Or should we sanitize it, with a white shroud and a green heart and a, polite message that you might get in a sympathy card? I guess that's a debate that we're not even allowed to have amongst ourselves. The families are not even allowed to have that conversation to reach some sort of consensus. So we just do the best we can. We've stopped doing the projections out of respect. We do take vans at the anniversary and, drive it right outside Downing Street. We sort of basically taking the fight out onto the streets. The van drives around Parliament, messaging. Very kindly, people that own the bus stop shelters gave us the site so that we could, talk about Grenfell, billboards and so on and so on. And it was all donated by some very kind people who wanted to support the campaign. And then all of a sudden we heard about the fire in Milan 3 years ago, the Torre de Moro, and it was exactly the same cladding. And so we came out here and we met with the Milan survivors days after their devastating fire. And beyond that, 6 months ago, another cladding fire in Valencia, where 10 people died, including a 2-week-old baby. But we are taking those actions. We are making it happen with the support of some people that just help us, whether it's with facilities or, communication support or whatever. It's literally us. If you put the 3 fires side by side, the 3 towers, sometimes I can't even recognize which one is which because they're so exactly the same. Cladding fires where the fire takes over the tower within minutes. And this is just to bring you to the reality of what this deregulation has meant. In the inquiry, the judge said, or the chair said, with some exceptions, we have not attempted to apportion blame. We have in general asked ourselves whether a particular act or omission contributed in some way to the fire, and if so, to what extent. This lovely lady is very, very much dear to me. Her name is Flora Neda. She and her son are the only survivors from the top floor. Her son carried her down. The top floor is where they found the majority of the deceased. Her husband stayed behind trying to help some women that had taken shelter there, including Nazanin's mother and aunt, and told his wife and son to go and that he would follow once he was able to get the ladies to, leave. But of course they didn't leave. It was too late for him and he jumped. This is Mr. Saber, who Flora and Saber had been married for about 25 years. They were from Afghanistan and they had fled Afghanistan after the first takeover of the Taliban. When we went to the tower at the anniversary last year, I was with Flora and she looked up at the tower and she said, imagine how brave he must have been to jump through those flames. And it really got me because I don't think that in all the discussions about the whys and wherefores, that human impact has really got across actually in terms of the people that are living, that are the immediate families of those who died. Flora was actually in a coma for weeks. And she was just very, very lucky to survive in the end. And then it's that sort of the moments of chance, the what ifs, because actually this is a photo of Flora and her son and Saber arriving at the tower just 2 minutes before the fire started. And she told me that if only they could not been able to get parking space near the tower. Normally parking was really bad around that area, but that night they were able to find parking near the tower. And that difference of 2 minutes was the difference of life and death for her son and her life and her son's life being shattered forever. This woman is just incredible. Her courage is just remarkable and really motivates me. But there is a shrine to her husband in her living room to this day. And I don't think that will ever be removed until she finally has some sort of closure. One of the items that was returned to her from the devastated inferno of her apartment was this metal heart. And it was really curious that it had survived where everything else had been destroyed, the whole life, and of course her husband. So she keeps it, and every so often she takes it out and feels it. So objects became really important in the aftermath. And the headline in the Telegraph this year was, wife of Grenfell hero says final inquiry report is not justice for us. No one is going to jail. And that is the problem. There are no consequences. These companies can do whatever they like. exploit weak regulatory markets, and there's never going to be any consequences unless we can come together and make sure there are uniform standards across the world for ACMP cladding, and that most importantly, as there are in pharmaceutical cases, set precedent where you hit them in their pockets and you ban the products or you introduce a uniform standard, these fires will continue to happen. And we come full circle. The report, costing £173 million, concluded that everyone is to blame, so no one is to blame. And it's ironic that even though that's where we're at, and the lawyers don't really come out and say it. We had to kind of, after our press conference, the Metropolitan Police was forced to talk about the fact that manslaughter charges will be extremely unlikely because they will not be able to meet the bar of probable prosecution. But they say it between the lines because, you know, the English language is wonderful. You can really hide a lot with words. And so they say we seek these charges. Well, I said, well, you know, I seek to be a size 10. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be a size 10. Seeking something is not delivering. When we come together, it is so powerful. These families speaking to each other, talking to each other, very well informed, picking up information from each other, questions that they have, they take back to their lawyers. Often it's not answered. I'm very, very proud to be with them and stand with them shoulder to shoulder for as long as they want me to. And it's a privilege, an absolute privilege to serve. Thank you.